We live in odd times. For many reasons, but perhaps to me personally, among the most surreal things is seeing congressional hearings regarding UAP and NHI, or aliens if you're not up on the current nomenclature. It's strange to see the most out there and extreme allegations about our own place in the universe be alleged, all wrapped up in hints, winks, and nods, and bureaucratic lingo. And things got stranger because now an infamous talk show host has interviewed one of the most influential figures in the modern disclosure process. I was minding my own business when I saw a Moistcritical video pop up in my feed where he reacted to an interview that Dr. Phil did on his podcast with Dave Grush, one of the main drivers of the modern congressional hearings on UAP. Have led to, I think, 5 tranches of documents, videos, images, and testimony about the matter. I was curious to watch the interview without commentary. Once I watched it, I decided to provide my own summary and commentary on it. So, without further ado, let's dive into the weird world of modern alien disclosure. Hello, everyone. Giant Stoned Head here. If you enjoy obscure science and forgotten history, you can support the channel by dropping a like, clicking subscribe, or sharing the video. I truly appreciate it. And now let's talk about aliens again. So let's get this out of the way. You're probably wondering why in the world someone who's supposed to be a reputable figure in this whole process talking to Dr. Phil of all people. I'm aware that Dr. Phil is not actually a doctor and is more of a two-bit grifter with ties to the current admin, for reasons I don't fully comprehend other than birds of a feather tend to flock together. However, this is likely the reason that Mr. Grush went on the podcast. Apparently, Dr. Phil has direct ties and contact to the current admin, and while I don't prefer the somewhat ego stroking tone Mr. Grush takes toward the admin and Dr. Phil, there's a reason for that. You just attract more flies with honey. And Mr. Grush is very committed to disclosure, and more on that in a moment. So he's using what means are at his disposal to do so. If getting words out means talking to Dr. Phil, I guess that's in the wheelhouse. And now to the matter of Grush himself. His career has been in the military and intelligence world, and he speaks a lot of classified projects or materials he dealt with in the course of said career. The whistleblower process has been hard for him both personally and professionally. More or less, he says he went to Congress to publicly testify of what he found to protect himself and his family. He resigned his Air Force commission close to retirement in lieu of being fired. He has undergone attacks due to the fact he's autistic, has ADHD, and PTSD due to his service in Afghanistan. He has testified publicly what he could, and in more secure settings about more classified things, all of these under oath with the penalty of perjury on the table. That makes it all the more. So, all in all, it makes him come across as credible to me, despite making the podcast rounds and talking to Dr. Phil. At the very least, he believes what he's saying to be true. The extent to which it actually is remains to be seen. Let's sketch out the broad scope of Grush's allegations, what he's testified to be true under oath. He claims there has been a legacy recovery program dating back to the 40s dedicated to the recovery and reverse engineering of craft designed, built, and piloted by non human intelligences, NHI. The CIA, intelligence branches of the military, and aerospace and defense contractors were all involved with little oversight from civilian leadership. Facts of the program were deliberately hidden from Congress. The whole quote unquote deep state apparatus saw elected officials as temporary employees of the government and reveal as little to them about the program as they can get away with. Frisch goes into details about all the different agencies involved, a veritable alphabet soup of government agencies all jockeying to either discover or keep secret what is going on, depending on which side of the issue they're on. He says that during the course of his own investigation, he interviewed government officials up to the cabinet level who were involved in the legacy program, and brought all this to the Biden admin to show where the bodies were buried, perhaps quite literally. I hate to agree with Dr. Phil, but when someone's right, they're right. He complains that the UAP tranches are released without much context. Random videos, documents, snippets of interviews, and testimony, all dumped without a cohesive narrative. Hard to hear the signal in the noise. This perhaps is a deliberate effort to obscure the truth. That, or incompetence. Probably both. Also, there's a comment about grainy gun camera videos that makes sense to me. They don't seem as clear as they could be. Perhaps copies shown to the public are the worst versions, or they're intentionally degraded. There's little talk about the potential psychological impact of disclosure, since the not so good doctor's whole shtick is that he's a psychologist. He's not entirely wrong, though, about the concept of ontological shock. Ontological refers to core assumptions or a fundamental understanding about the nature of reality. These, the swath of the population, could find the idea that we aren't alone and that we share the planet with intelligences on par or greater than our own, deeply unsettling and upending to their worldview. If you don't believe this, just sit and really think about what it would be like to be face to face with a non human entity that is equally or more intelligent and capable than you are. Usually, this kind of ontological shock is the given reason for any sort of cover up. That and all of this was funded in some way, and I highly doubt all this government money was properly appropriated or accounted for. So, most likely, there would be some legal consequences for those involved in the whole process. Rush says later in the interview, members of the legacy program were potentially defrauding taxpayers by sequestering technology that could be used for the public good. I kind of took it based on things he said and things that I've seen elsewhere alleged that he's implying some sort of energy tech, especially the kind of uh, powers the crafts, and maybe it could lead to some green energy revolution. Kind of what he was getting at. Most of all, that is a summary of the lead up to the meat of the matter and what most people are kind of interested in. His central allegation is that he has seen audio and visual evidence of the legacy retrieval program, including vehicles and dead NHI, which he claims to have learned about from the state intelligence of a rival nation rather than from within, which that in itself is disturbing if true. I'll let you sit with the implications of that. As for the alleged NHI crafts, how many are there? Bruce says the number is not clear. More than 25, less than 100, recovered since the 40s. He said that defense contractors during the War on Terror especially did some of their own retrieval, which skews the count. They include a wide variety of shapes and functions, apparently, although we're not clear on their functions, but the shapes include cigar, boomerang, triangle, saucer, egg, and tic-tac, and orbs. And he says that we don't know the exact space or time they came from. The word time stood out to me as oddly specific. And one thing I've learned about Grush is you have to listen carefully. He drops a lot of little hints that he doesn't elaborate on. Breadcrumbing, I think the kids call it, but I could be wrong about that too. In any case, he says that NHI range from something relatively familiar to us, who actually aren't that much more intelligent than us, to exotic and hard to classify life forms. He references what he calls plasmoids, or luminous orbs that appear in groups over military facilities. He speculates as to if they're actually organisms themselves, or the plasma discharge is some artifact of a propulsion system that obscures the craft. But he is not sure. It seems he's not sure of a lot of things, but I digress. He mentions that some of the craft are drones, or specifically empty craft with no pilots. To me, that's a distinction. A drone is not meant to carry a pilot, at least in our design philosophy. But it implies then that these craft are built to be potentially dual use, either piloted or not, or something happened to the crews. He also hints at the concept of craft that are too big to move, perhaps with a base built around them. That's a big question mark, though. In any case, as for the pilots themselves, he says he saw images of cadavers and they look like the pop culture gray aliens you'd expect. Big heads, black almond-shaped eyes, a small body, and skinny limbs. He mentions also that some of these have been taken alive and held in detainment situations, where members of the Legacy program interacted with them. He hints that a former cabinet member was involved in that sort of operation. He says they communicate with, in plain terms, telepathy. He says he personally knows people involved in retrieval missions who experience this. However, these things are apparently not the only critters running or flying around. Rich says that the phenomenon is not entirely extraterrestrial. He lists several exotic life forms, which can be broadly categorized as ultra-terrestrial, which is to say, another intelligence that evolved on Earth but is somehow hidden from us, according to a quick Google search. Because I had never really heard the term before this. These can be beings from other dimensions, whatever that would actually mean, or a previous iteration of Earth-based intelligence who left and came back. He also emphasized the concept of NHI under the sea in his wink and nod way, He seems to think a lot of this originates down there. And also, an odd comment was that none of these life forms conflict with traditional Judeo Christian theology. I'm guessing this links back to the concept of ontological shock and is trying to head that off in some way. So, what do I think? I've mostly just kind of summarized what was said and not provided a lot of my own commentary. Uh, this is just a lot to take in. It jibes with what I know that has been said before Congress and released in some of the documentation. It's consistent. I think Grush believes what he's saying. As for what's true, it's hard to say. I have a feeling there's cover stories upon cover stories, and the truth has been obscured so much from what was originally going on back in the 40s, and perhaps the cover stories have taken on a life of their own. So, as to what's true and what isn't, I'm not sure. And I'm not sure anybody is. There's just some out there things like telepathy and stuff that makes it a little hard to swallow. I do think it's interesting the phenomena is said from the span from the sea to the upper atmosphere, from physical entity to non-physical. Because there's just a lot of out there accounts. If you follow, horror stuff or cryptid stuff, and people tell all kinds of wild stories. It seems like this telling of the phenomena covers a lot of that stuff. It just makes it hard to swallow though, because like if it was limited to only gray aliens, okay, that would be hard enough to swallow. But now, especially gray aliens that could talk to humans telepathically. But now there's all this other stuff on top of it. It gives them some weight though, because these were alleged under oath, and it's not just some guy in his basement rambling. So there might be something to it. At the very least, the person saying it believes it's true. But there's never really any evidence provided. A lot of second or third hands, hints of hints and winks and nods and implications. I think I said it before in the last alien video. Wouldn't really expect them to try to gray alien out into Congress on C-SPAN to say hi. That'd be a form of proof for sure. But if you could believe it in the age of AI. But we're going to need more than testimony and allegations. Something is clearly happening here. People are seeing something. There's been allegations of planes almost running into some of these things out in like training exercises and stuff. And the public funds are going somewhere. There's a black box of money at Congress who is, they've abdicated a lot of their responsibilities, but they do allegedly hold the purse strings of the government. That's their constitutional obligation, whether they actually live up to it or not. And Congress doesn't know where this money is going. So there's some sort of massive fraud going on. Not a shock in and of itself, but if anybody cared to investigate that, that would be kind of nice, you would think. So it's not nothing that Grush seems credible. When it comes down to it, that's not enough. There needs to be tangible proof, anomalous metals, schematics of craft, a craft itself, a body, something civilian researchers can independently verify. There's a lot of noise, but not much signal. I thought the interview was interesting for a summary of what Grush had to say, if nothing else, since I didn't feel like anything new was really alleged. I think the telepathy bit might have been new. I've heard that from alien encounters that I've read online or listened to videos about. It's in most of the big ones, but I don't recall it from official testimony. But I haven't listened to all of it, so who knows. Also, just about that, I don't know how that would work. If there's an advanced intelligence able to do that, how would they be able to interface with our brains and then speak to us in a way we actually could understand? Also, the concept of interdimensional ultra-terrestrials is interesting. But what does interdimensional actually mean? It's just a word that's thrown around. They live in a parallel reality to our own. It can move back and forth at will. Why would they do so? Do they have to have special craft to do so? Can they just walk through it? What's the motivation? What's the motivation for extraterrestrials who visit here and attempt to make contact in some way. That's a little bit easier to swallow because if we found a planet with life, we would probably try to send a probe. And there's been life on Earth for however many billions of years. So somebody would have looked at us and saw, hey, there's a planet there with life. Because, we're not too far off from being able to, I think anyway, being able to see signatures of life on other planets. It would be ambiguous, but you can detect levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide and methane in the atmosphere, or you look for artificial chemicals if you're looking for intelligent life. There would be ways to tell. So anybody with sufficient technology could be able to see as good as send a probe. How long it would take to get here is a whole different matter, but it's within the realm of possibility that somebody would do it. So we probably would try too. So that kind of makes sense. But if there are all these different groups of intelligences, do they interact with each other? Do they have different motivations? Are they at odds with each other? Are some on our side and some not? Are they just all relatively neutral and just kind of here and just try to ignore us? It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. It just kind of all raises more questions than it answers. And frankly, I don't really trust the process unless there's some huge push for transparency and there's a full disclosure of everything with independent verification from civilian scientists and journalists and researchers, or a independent verification done by civilians. For example, a civilian scientist captures unequivocal proof of an alien craft or something like that, or an NHI makes contact with a civilian scientist, whatever. Either way, it just all seems like all smoke and no fire. It's interesting to consider, but as always, the hard proof is lacking. But what do you think? I'm interested to know what you have to think about this. I'm skeptical, if you can't tell. I always default to nothing's happening. But, there's something there, but we just don't know. How about that? That's a better way to explain my position. If you have any suggestions for other topics, let me know. I'll be posting here weekly. This was kind of a fluke. This will probably be posted on like a Friday or something, just to kind of supplementary material, just like the last alien video was. With all that, I appreciate you listening to me ramble about aliens again, and thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it.